The rain came down as though the sky itself had split open on the night of October 17th, 1858, Callaway County, Missouri. It hammered the tin roof of the big house like a regiment of iron-shod horses, poured off the eaves in solid sheets, turned the yard into a red clay sea that swallowed boots to the ankle and held them the way quicksand holds a man who has already given up. In the root cellar where they had chained him hand and foot, Silas Cole counted every drop that leaked through the ceiling planks. 143 before Delilah's first scream reached him, 219 before the second, thinner one. After that, only the rain and the low animal sounds that no human throat should ever have to make. They dragged what was left of her out just after first light, along with his little brother Jonah, and threw both bodies over the fence into the hog pen. Jonah had tried to fight when they took Delilah. Mr. Greer, the head overseer, had shot him through the kneecap first so the boy would crawl a while before the pigs finished him. Master Thomas Ramsey stood on the porch in his wool nightshirt, sipping coffee gone cold, and told the hands to let the hogs do their work. "Lesson sticks longer when it's rote and blood and slop," he said, and spat a stream of tobacco juice into the mud for punctuation. Silas watched through the small grated window set high in the cellar wall. The new irons on his wrists were bright St. Louis steel, bought special after his last runaway attempt 2 years before. They had learned to be careful with him. They called him Shadow because he moved without sound and because, when he fixed his eyes on a man, something cold slid across the skin like moonlight over water. Ramsey had paid $650 for him in '45, a 15-year-old already 6'3" and bare feet. Best money he ever spent, Ramsey liked to brag at the tavern in Fulton. Strong as 2 prime field hands and half the mouth. Mouth or no mouth, trouble found him all the same. They left him in the dark 3 full days with nothing but the rainwater that dripped through the boards and the smell of his own blood where the irons had already begun to bite. On the second night, he worked the left cuff against a rusted nail he had discovered years earlier and kept secret in a crack between stones. Skin peeled away in long ribbons, but the iron gave a hair's breadth. On the third night, the storm returned harder than the first, lightning strobing white through the grating, thunder shaking the ground like artillery. In one of those flashes, he saw Delilah's face, eyes wide, mouth open around a scream that never came, and something inside him finished breaking. What rose to take its place was quiet, exact, and very, very patient. The cellar key hung on a peg just outside the kitchen door. House custom. Whoever cooked breakfast took it down, checked the prisoner, locked up again. That morning it was Aunt Violet, 63 years old, spine curved like a shepherd's crook from 50 years bent over washtubs and cotton rows. She had nursed Delilah at her breast when the child's own mother was sold south. When she pushed the door open and saw Silas standing free in the dark, wrists raw to the bone, blood running black in the dim, she did not cry out. She simply pressed the heavy key into his palm and whispered the only map she knew. "Go south till the water smells of death and rot, then east till the cypress knees bleed red in the sunrise. After that, even the best dogs forget how to follow a man." He bent and kissed her forehead once, tasting salt and wood smoke and grief older than either of them, then stepped out into the storm. The poison lived in a cobalt blue bottle on the top shelf of the tack room, labeled in Ramsey's own spidery hand, "Strychnine, for wolves and varmints." Silas had watched Greer measure it into bait meat 100 times. He took the bottle, a skinning knife with a handle wrapped in rawhide, and the dead overseer's boots that still held the warmth of the man's feet. Then he walked back through the downpour to the big house as though he belonged there. Ramsey was snoring in the parlor, sprawled across the horsehair settee with an empty peach brandy jug cradled like a baby. Greer and the 2 others, Harlan and little Zeke, lay on pallets in the hall, too drunk or too lazy to climb the stairs. Silas moved among them the way wind moves through tall grass. He uncorked the bottle and poured a thin, careful stream into each open mouth, just enough. Then he sat in the rocking chair by the dying fire and waited for the storm to quiet. The first convulsion hit Ramsey just before the grandfather clock struck 4:30. He came up off the settee, clawing at his throat, eyes bulging white, spine bowing backward until the vertebrae cracked like green kindling. Greer woke to the sound and managed one strangled curse before the poison locked his jaws so tight his teeth shattered. Harlan pissed himself and tried to crawl toward the door. Little Zeke bit through his own tongue and painted the wallpaper with a bright red arc. Silas watched until the last heel stopped drumming the floorboards. Then he spoke, soft as falling ash. Tell Delilah I'm coming directly." He left the empty bottle on the mantel where morning light would find it first. By sunrise, every white man within 30 miles knew. 4 dead in one house, no sign of forced entry. The cellar door hanging open like a scream. The hounds ran in frantic circles, baying at shadows, confused by the rain and the blood and the scent of something older than fear. Before noon, the reward posters were already being nailed to every courthouse door and tavern wall from Jefferson City to the river. $500 for Silas Cole alive, $300 dead. Highest price ever offered for a single slave in the state of Missouri. He was already 40 miles south, moving only when the moon was down, following creek beds and deer trails that only he could read. Hunger was an old neighbor. He chewed sassafras root and wild garlic until his gums bled. Every plantation he passed, he left a mark. 3 parallel slashes in the bark of a sweet gum tree, cut deep enough to scar for decades. A promise to some, a warning to others. Word traveled faster than any horse could run. Shadow killed 4 white men and walked out of the storm like he had a deed to it. Shadow left no track. Shadow was coming back for the rest. In the slave quarters, the old sorrowful spirituals fell quiet. In their place, people began to hum something new, low and steady as a second heartbeat. Children learned it first. Mothers hushed them, afraid, then hummed it too when no overseer was near. By December, the posse had swollen to 60 men riding with bloodhounds borrowed from 3 counties and warrants signed by the governor himself. They found the sweet gum trees and hacked them down in fury. They hanged 2 free blacks who happened to be tall and quiet. They burned cabins just to watch something burn. None of it mattered. Silas Cole had already reached the great cypress swamps where the Bootheel sinks into Arkansas, and the Mississippi forgets its own name. There the water was black and thick as molasses, the air so heavy with rot that breathing felt like swallowing earth. Mosquitoes rose in clouds that could choke a horse. Men said the place was full of fever, cottonmouths, and the ghosts of Choctaw who never left. Perfect country for a shadow. He built a raft of cypress knees and cane, pulled it miles deep into channels that twisted back on themselves until the sun itself got lost. There he waited, patient as stone, and listened to the water carry news on its slow brown tongue. They began to come, 1, then 2, then 5 at a time. A woman with a baby tied to her back and a broken jaw. A boy no older than Jonah had been, limping from a fresh whipping. An old man who said he would rather die free in the swamp than live one more day in the fields. Silas met them at the edge, spoke once so they knew his voice, and led them through paths only he remembered. 8 nights north to the hidden ferry near Cape Girardeau. Then across into Illinois where the ground itself was free the instant your foot touched it. He never asked their real names. Names were chains of another kind. He gave them new ones: Bird, Knife, River, Little Moon, so that if they were caught, no one back home would bleed for knowing them. Spring turned to summer. The reward climbed to 2,000, then 3. Newspapers in St. Louis printed wild engravings, a giant cloaked in Spanish moss, eyes only white holes in the page. Reward $5,000, dead or alive. The governor added another 1,000 from state funds. Silas saw one of the posters nailed to a sycamore at the swamp's edge and smiled for the first time, since Delilah's scream cut off in the rain. $5,000, enough to buy a small plantation, and every soul on it twice over. He folded the paper small and tucked it inside the strip of yellow calico next to his heart. Let them come. They were already coming. The swamp did not forgive mistakes. It taught Silas the truth the way a mother teaches a child not to touch fire, by letting the lesson burn deep. He learned its language in layers. First came the smells, the sweet rot of cypress knees, the iron tang of alligator musk, the sour milk stench that meant quicksand close beneath the duckweed. Then the sounds, the hollow knock of woodpeckers that told him high ground was near, the sudden silence of frogs when a cottonmouth slid past, the low coughing roar of a gator that carried for miles across black water. Finally came the feel of it, the way the air itself grew heavier the deeper you went, pressing on the chest like a giant hand, reminding every heartbeat that this place had swallowed armies before and would swallow more. Between journeys, he returned to the same hummock no white man had ever marked on a map, a low island of red clay and live oak roots ringed by water so dark it looked solid. There he rebuilt his shelter every few weeks, weaving fresh palmetto fans into the roof because the old ones rotted almost overnight. Inside he kept only what could not be taken: The skinning knife with its rawhide grip worn smooth by his palm, Ramsey's tin cup dented now from months of use, and the strip of Delilah's dress, yellow calico with tiny white flowers, faded almost to gray but still the brightest thing in his world. He slept with it against his cheek and woke tasting her name the way other men wake tasting blood after a nightmare. The people kept coming. Some found him by following the 3 slash marks he left on sweet gum trees miles apart. Others were guided by rumors that moved faster than any posse. Follow the water that smells of death until you hear a man who speaks softer than the wind. They arrived half-drowned, half-starved, eyes wild with the kind of fear that comes after hope has already died once. A mother named Ruth carried twins no heavier than sacks of meal, and a brand on her shoulder still raw from the iron. A cooper called Isaiah limped in with his left hand crushed by a cotton gin accident and murder in his heart. A girl of 12, skinny as a heron, eyes old as scripture, slipped through the canebrake alone with nothing but a quilt and a butcher knife she had stolen from the big house kitchen. Silas gave her the name Sparrow because she weighed less than the bird and moved twice as quick. He greeted each the same way, one palm flat against their chest so they felt a heartbeat that had not panicked in months. Then a single word, spoken low. Follow. He never promised they would live. He promised direction, and in that place, direction was the same as prayer. Between groups he hunted, gar fish with a sharpened stick, possum in the oaks, once a young deer that wandered too close to the water's edge. He cooked over fires no bigger than a hat, banked them with mud so the smoke rose thin and blue and vanished before it reached the treetops. Hunger was a familiar companion. He had known it in the fields, known it chained in Ramsey's cellar. Out here it was cleaner. No overseer counting mouthfuls, no fear that tomorrow the ration would be cut again because some white man's horse threw a shoe. In April of 1859, a boy arrived who carried danger in his pocket like a loaded pistol. He was 16, cafe au lait skin, straight hair, green eyes that marked him dangerous in 2 states. Name was Levi Garrison, freeborn in Cincinnati, educated by Quakers who believed paper and ink could unmake chains. He had walked south with 2 white conductors who turned back when the patrols grew too thick. Levi carried a letter sealed with red wax, the symbol of chained hands breaking apart. When Silas broke the seal by the light of fireflies, the message was short and written in a woman's careful hand. We have heard what you do. A man who can vanish in Missouri swamps can vanish anywhere. Come north. We will pay in gold and gratitude. You could guide hundreds, maybe thousands. The road needs a living legend. Silas read it twice, then fed it to the flames. He looked at Levi's soft palms, at the city boots already splitting at the seams, and felt something close to sorrow. Tell your lady, he said. The road already has a legend and he ain't for sale. Levi stayed anyway. 3 weeks he followed Silas through the channels, learning to pole the raft without splashing, to smear his legs with mud and skunk cabbage until the hounds sneezed themselves blind, to sleep sitting upright with his back against a cypress knee, because lying down invited dreams too loud to survive. He watched Silas deliver a baby on a bed of moss while the mother bit down on a stick to keep from screaming. He watched Silas kill a 12-foot cottonmouth with nothing but a stick and a prayer, then skin it neat as a butcher before the tail stopped twitching. When Levi finally left for Illinois, he took 43 people with him, more than Silas had ever trusted to one journey, and he walked at their head like a shepherd who had learned the way from a wolf. After Levi came others. Word had grown legs and wings. Planters woke to find their best hands gone without a single footprint leading away from the quarters. Patrols rode out furious and came back hollow-eyed, speaking of laughter that came from under the water and footprints that ended in midair. In Charleston, they printed new handbills with a crude woodcut. A tall figure draped in Spanish moss, eyes only white holes. Reward $5,000. The governor added another 1,000 from the state treasury. Dead or alive no longer mattered. They just wanted the nightmares to stop. Silas saw one of the posters nailed to a sycamore at the edge of the swamp and laughed aloud. The first real laugh since Delilah's blood soaked the barn floor. $5,000. Enough to buy every soul Ramsey had ever owned and still have coin left for a suit of fine broadcloth. He folded the paper into a square no bigger than a playing card and tucked it inside the calico strip next to his heart. Let them come. He was ready. They came in August. 237 men. 3 companies of state militia wearing gray wool already rotting in the heat. 20 professional slave catchers from Tennessee with Cuban bloodhounds that could follow a scent across open water, 2 small cannons dragged off a steamboat at New Madrid. They ringed the entire southeast corner of the state like a noose made of torches and rope. Their plan was simple and brutal. Shrink the circle day by day, burn the canebrakes, drain the sloughs, drive everything living toward the center until the swamp itself spat Silas Cole out like a bone. He watched them for a week from the top of a cypress older than the state itself, motionless as a praying mantis. He counted campfires, marked which men drank corn liquor until they puked, which ones beat their dogs when the trail went cold, which ones prayed aloud at night and still slept with their rifles across their knees. On the 8th night, he slipped into their main camp wearing nothing but mud and darkness. He cut the throat of the lead hound, quick, almost merciful, then poured an entire keg of lamp oil into their water barrels. By morning, half the force was doubled over with cramps bad enough to wish for death. Still, they pressed on. He led them deeper, leaving just enough sign to keep hope alive. A broken twig here, a partial print in the mud there, a strip of yellow calico tied to a willow branch like a mocking flag. When they reached the place the old Choctaw called Devil's Backbone, an island shaped like a spinal ridge rising out of black water, he stopped running. He had 43 people with him then, the largest group yet. Mothers with babies slung in quilts, old men who could barely walk, a preacher missing 3 fingers from a fro accident 30 years ago. They looked at Silas like Moses standing at the Red Sea. He looked back and felt the weight of every soul pressing against his ribs. "This is as far as we run together," he told them at dusk. "From here you go north without me." They argued. Some wept. The preacher quoted scripture about the Lord providing a ram in the thicket. Silas listened until the words ran out, then spoke once, quiet as the swamp itself. Moses never saw the promised land either. He gave them the big raft, the last of the dried fish, the skinning knife with its rawhide grip. He kept only the tin cup and the yellow calico. Then he turned south, back toward the closing ring of torches, and began to sing under his breath, the old field song Delilah used to hum while shelling peas on the cabin step. The notes floated out across the water soft as moth wings. Behind him, 43 people poled into the dark and did not look back. The soldiers found the island empty at dawn. They found the raft gone, the footprints of many heading north, and one set, bare, deliberate, deep, heading straight into the heart of the closing circle. They followed those prints like men possessed. For 3 days the swamp burned. Cannon smoke hung low under the cypress ceiling like a funeral shroud. Men waded waist-deep in water thick with leeches, screaming when cottonmouth struck, cursing when fever took hold before noon. They lost 17 to sickness, 6 to drowning, 4 to their own misfired guns in the dark. On the 3rd evening, they reached a clearing no white man had ever seen and found Silas Cole waiting for them. He stood on a fallen log, shirtless, the cross-shaped brand livid against his skin. In one hand he held Ramsey's tin cup, in the other, nothing at all. The captain of the militia, a St. Louis lawyer turned soldier for the bounty, raised his rifle and ordered him to kneel. Silas smiled the way winter smiles. Then the clearing exploded with gunfire. It was not one man they faced. It was every wrong ever done under the sun wearing one man's skin. The first volley came from behind them, cutting down 6 soldiers before they understood the shots were not theirs. Silas had spent the night moving in a great silent circle, firing from one spot, then running bent double to the next, using the swamp's echo to make 10 rifles sound like a regiment. Men spun in circles trying to find targets that dissolved into mist. Bullets whined off cypress trunks and slapped into water thick as blood. Someone screamed that the runaways had come back armed. Someone else screamed that the devil had chosen a side. Silas stepped into the smoke and walked forward. He carried no gun now. The rifle lay empty somewhere in the mud. He had fired his last round into the powder keg the artillerymen were trying to load. The explosion took both cannons and most of the gunners with them, turning the clearing into a bowl of flame and screaming. What was left of the militia, maybe 60 men still on their feet, formed a ragged half-moon and waited for him to come close enough to kill. He came close enough. 20 yards out, he stopped. The torches showed the cross on his shoulder, the yellow calico tied around his neck like a scarf, the emptiness in his eyes that had once held Delilah's face, and now held only the promise of payment. The captain found his voice first. "Silas Cole, By authority of the state of Missouri, you are under arrest for murder, theft, and incitement of servile insurrection. Lay down your weapons and surrender peacefully, or—" Silas tilted his head, listening to something only he could hear. "You still think words mean something out here?" He raised the tin cup in a mock toast. "This belonged to Thomas Ramsey," he called, loud enough for every man to hear over the ringing in their ears. "I took it the night I took his life. I've been carrying his taste in my mouth ever since." He drank. Just swamp water, but the captain flinched anyway. Then Silas moved. He came off the log like a panther, straight at the line. The front rank fired and missed clean. Fear makes men jerk triggers the way drunkards drop glasses. By the time they worked the ramrods home, he was among them. The skinning knife was only 8 inches of steel, but in his hand it became something out of Revelation. He did not slash wild. Every stroke was deliberate, almost tender. A throat here, a hamstring there. The soft place under the arm where the artery runs close to the surface. Men fell screaming or fell silent. It hardly mattered. The captain tried to rally them, waving his saber and shouting about honor and the flag and $5,000. But honor has shallow roots in swamp water. When Silas turned toward him, the man's courage folded like wet paper. He dropped the sword and ran. Silas let him go. There would be time. 15 minutes after the first shot, it was over. 58 men lay dead or dying in the clearing. The rest had vanished into the brush, leaving boots and guns and religion behind. The captain was found 3 days later floating face down near Commerce with his own saber through his back. Nobody ever claimed to have done it. Silas stood in the middle of the carnage and felt nothing but the old, hollow place where his heart used to be. Blood dripped from his arms, not all of it belonging to other men. A Minier ball had torn through his left side just above the hip. Another had shattered his right collarbone and left the arm hanging useless. He could feel the warmth spreading, the lightness coming into his legs the way it does when the body knows its work is nearly finished. He walked to the edge of the clearing where the water began again and knelt. From his pocket he drew the strip of calico. It was soaked red now, but the tiny yellow flower still showed if you knew where to look. He pressed it to his lips once, gentle as a kiss. "I opened the road, Delilah," he whispered. 43 more tonight, and all the ones who'll follow. That's more than any chain could hold." Then he lay down on his back so the sky could see his face, and waited for the swamp to take him home. They searched for weeks, dragged every channel, prodded every hummock with bayonets, offered double reward for the body alone. Nothing. The water closed over him the way it closes over a stone, and not even the alligators spoke of what they found. Years later, when the war had come and gone and Missouri lay in cinders trying to remember what it had been, people still told the story differently depending on who was listening. White folks in the rebuilt courthouses and the new brick houses along the river said Silas Cole died raving in the swamp, eaten by his own madness and the mosquitoes. They said the militia had broken the back of the runaway evil once and for all, that order had been restored, that the dead soldiers were martyrs to civilization and property rights. They built a monument in Fulton to the brave men who fell trying to bring one lunatic to justice. And every 4th of July they read the names aloud, while the band played Dixie. Black folks told it quieter, passing it mouth to ear the way you pass fire through a dark field, so the overseer never sees the glow. They said Shadow never died at all. They said on certain nights when the moon hangs low and red over the Bootheel, you can still see a tall man poling a cypress raft through the channels, yellow cloth at his throat, guiding the lost ones north. They said more than 400 people walked his road to freedom before the war made roads unnecessary, and that every one of them carried a piece of his name across the river like a torch. They said the captain who ran that night made it all the way to Texas, changed his name, raised sons who never knew why their father woke screaming when thunder rolled across the plains. They said some of the soldiers who lived went home and freed their own people without a word of explanation, as if a shadow had stood at the foot of their beds and reminded them what price comes due. In 1882, an old woman in Chicago, straight-backed, white-haired, eyes sharp as a hawk's, stood up in a church basement and told a room full of children that she had once been 12 years old and called Sparrow. She told them how a man with a cross burned into his shoulder gave her a new name, and 8 days of her life she still dreamed about. When she finished speaking, she opened her hand and showed them a scrap of yellow calico, faded almost to white, soft as a moth's wing. "This," she said, "is what freedom feels like when somebody pays for it with everything they had." Then she placed it in the collection plate and let it go. Out in the Bootheel, the swamp kept growing, slow and patient, swallowing plantations whole. Cotton fields went back to canebrake. Big houses rotted into the mud, and the cypress knees rose higher every year like monuments nobody asked for. On some nights, if you stand very still at the edge of the water and the wind is right, you can hear a low humming under the frog noise and the alligator bellow, steady as a heartbeat, old as sorrow, carrying north. It is the sound of 43 sets of feet that reached free soil that August night, and 400 more behind them, and all the ones who will come after as long as stories still have power to open doors. It is the sound of a man who became a road. And somewhere beneath the black water, wrapped in yellow flowers and silence, Silas Cole keeps walking it still.